The musty atmosphere of the archive hall felt heavy with the weight of ages. Dark oaken bookshelves sagged beneath countless volumes of forgotten lore and history. Illuminated manuscripts, painstakingly illustrated and copied by medieval monks, shared the overcrowded shelves with the abundant literary fruits of the post-Gutenberg generations. Leather-bound memoirs, histories, and codexes were packed too deep in places or piled high upon the floor in tottering stacks that threatened to topple over at any minute. Dusty artifacts, souvenirs from bygone centuries were scattered here, and there among the copious written records, a ceremonial brass chalice from the 13th century, the curved scimitar of a long-dead Ottoman prince, an embossed silver plate commemorating the epic battle of Lycan in 1654, and a filigreed golden scepter bearing the royal crest of Transylvania. All precious relics from nearly 900 years of vampiric history. Celine had the secluded library all to herself. No surprise there. Craven and his hedonistic entourage were more interested in the present pleasures than the accumulated debris of the past. Dust and cobwebs frosted the archaic tomes, testifying to how seldom the archive was visited by the Udugaz Sybaritic inhabitants. Even the manor's myriad chambermaids seldom entered these cloistered chambers. As a rule, the servant girls had been selected more for their alluring faces and figures, and compliant dispositions, than for their diligence. Just as well, Celine thought. She had serious research to do, and no desire to be interrupted. Her eyes scanned the bulging bookshelves, looking for the specific records she required. Still clad for battle, she stalked the library in her muddy leathers. Outside, the storm was still going strong. Rain pelted the library's lancet windows, causing watery shadows to dance eerily upon the walls. Her gaze fell on the rectangular pine door of an inconspicuous closet. Tucked between two looming oak bookcases, in truth, it had been at least 70 years since she had consulted these archives herself. But she dimly recalled that the chronicles covering the early decades of the war were kept in this long-abandoned closet. In theory, the information she sought would be there. She jiggled the antique crystal doorknob, only to find the closet door was locked. Of course, she thought, scowling. Heaven only knew what had become of the key. Unwilling to be thwarted so quickly, she drew back her leg and, kaboom, kicked the obstinate door right off its hinges. Dusty light poured into the interior of the closet, exposing its contents for the first time in uncounted generations. Celine smiled as she spotted several dozen ponderous tomes locked away behind a thick glass case, just as she remembered. Eureka, she thought. The cabinet inside the closet was unlocked. Sparing their vandalism, and Celine sifted through the enclosed volumes, peering closely at their time-worn spines and covers. Selecting 4 or 5 of the most promising candidates, she carried the heavy text over to a Victorian-style maple table, resting in the center of the library. She blew decades worth of dust, both the books and the table, before sitting down to inspect the ancient chronicles. In an ideal world, she would have pursued the text at her leisure, carefully reading each and every word. She sensed, though, that time was running out. So she flipped briskly, but gently through the dry and crumbling pages, searching urgently for the answers she hungered for. Columns of intricate calligraphy were accompanied by faded etchings depicting scenes from long crusades against the werewolves. At first, Celine nodded in approval at the portraits of medieval death dealers, riding to battle, the martial tableau filling her undead heart with pride. Yet, as she continued to pursue the elaborately detailed woodcuts, she was disturbed to see several illustrations that more closely resembled massacres than honest warfare. Ghastly images worthy of Dior portrayed captive beastmen and women, recognizable by their shaggy coats and canine paws, being tortured and burned at the stake by her armored ancestors. Half-human whelps were hurled like fuel onto the rising flames, or else were crushed beneath silver-shod hooves of death-dealers' steeds. Their childish proportions no protection against the merciless vampire warriors. Even over the gulf of centuries, the fear and anguish of the forsaken Lycans came across loud and clear. Frowning, she turned the page only to encounter an equally unsettling illustration that showed the chained Lycans, both male and female, both forced to their knees and branded like cattle. Leering death dealers brandishing vicious pikes and crossbows looked on red-hot silver was applied to the unfortunate Lycans, burning the emblems of their captors into their very flesh. "What are these?" Celine gasped out loud, recoiling from the grisly images. "Ancient myths? Medieval propaganda?" She ran her fingers down the yellowing parchment, trying to find some explanation for the book's unsettling illustrations. Her ivory brow furrowed as she struggled to decipher the adjacent text. Unfortunately, the scribbled chicken scratches appeared to be written in archaic form of Magyar, which was somewhat beyond her abilities. She gazed in frustration at the tiny, indecipherable calligraphy, which was cleverly interlaced with rows of miniature sketches, which matched the brands being burned onto the flesh of the various howling Lycans. Perhaps, she speculated, these pages were constituted a catalogue of the individual brands. Peering more closely at the mysterious symbols, she couldn't help observing that although the brands varied slightly from illustration to illustration, they all had been designed around one of three ornate capital letters, V, A, or M, just like the insignia on the tombs of the elders, Victor, Amelia, and Marcus. Despite her snug new leathers, a shiver passed through Celine, her mind fleeting from the distressing implications of the medieval woodcuts. She put the incriminating tome aside and reached for a different book. To her relief, this book was written in simple Old English. Flipping through it, however, she discovered that many of the entries and illustrations had been blacked out, with liberal applications of impenetrable India ink. Furthermore, dozens of the pages appeared to have been torn out and discarded. She raised the book off the table and turned over experimentally. None of the missing pages came falling out. Interesting, Celine thought, her suspicions aroused. Why had someone gone to such great efforts to cover up the past? What dark secrets were there being concealed? Leafing through the plundered volume, she came across a portrait of a solitary male Lycan, his looping claws extended at his side. Intriguingly, the Lycan's face had been completely burned away, leaving a circular gap near the top of the etching. Celine examined the mutilated portrait more carefully. Visible on the faceless Lycan's right arm was an elaborate cattle brand, incorporating a large capital V. V as in Victor, she thought unwillingly. A charred caption beneath the portrait read, Lucian, Scourge of the Immortals, Master of the Lycan Horde. Celine smiled grimly. Now we're getting somewhere, she thought. This is what she had been looking for. Beneath Lucian's defaced portrait was another etching, depicting a heated battle between armed vampires and lycanthropes. Vampires armed with silver swords and crossbows took on a snarling pack of both humanoid and wolven Lycans, with each side inflicting grievous harm upon the other. Shrieking Lycans their bestial faces contorted in agony, were impaled 3 or 4 deep on silver lances of vampiric cavalrymen, while elsewhere on the page, fully transformed werewolves tore unlucky vampires asunder with their dagger-sized fangs and claws. In the background, smoke and fire belched into the night sky from the mouths of several remote mountain caves. An overhanging moon, bringing the features of an outraged werewolf, looked down on the bloody scene with murder in its eyes. Celine recognized from Craven's egocentric recountings, if nothing else, the crucial battle of the Alps. Her finger tracked across the gutter of the books to the adjoining page. Of the scores of brave souls who ventured into Lucian's infernal fortress, only a single vampire survived, Craven of Leicester, not only for setting the great blaze, but for returning with tangible proof of the Lycan master's demise. The branded skin cut from Lucian's arm. At the bottom of the page was what appeared to be a piece of dried brown leather, folded neatly into a square. The tangible proof mentioned above wrinkling her nose in disgust. Celine carefully unfolded the paltry scrap of the hide to reveal the stylized letter V seared onto the fragment. She traced the brand with her fingertips, aware of the scrap's historic significance. This was no mere scrap of leather. It was a swatch of skin cut from the flesh of a fallen Lycan. Her gaze jumped back to the faceless portrait at the top of the opposite page. Comparing the brand of Lucian's arm to the revolting fragment spread out before her, the marks were identical. How about that? She thought archly, uncertain whether to be relieved or disappointed that the archives confirmed Craven's account of having disposed of Lucian nearly 6 centuries ago, a momentous feat that had elevated Craven instantly to the upper ranks of the Coven. As much as she hoped to catch Craven in a lie, it was good to know that the infamous Lucian was indeed well and truly dead. Or was he? Staring again at Lucian's burned-out portrait, Celine noticed a blackish smudge beneath the flanking hole where his face had been. Was there something beneath the ancient ashes? Wetting her fingertips, she gently rubbed away at some of the loose charring, exposing a familiar-looking star-shaped pendant. Bloody hell! She instantly recalled the identical pendant worn by the untamed Lycan, who had stabbed her in the shoulder, nearly killing her yesterday night. I don't believe it, she thought, dumbfounded by her discovery. Could that actually have been Lucian? If so, then Craven's slip of the tongue earlier had been even more revelatory than she had feared, and her people's greatest enemy was still alive and well. She slammed the book shut, her every nerve vibrating with alarm. She needed to do something, tell someone, before it was too late. Lucian, Lord of Werewolves, was a prowl in the night, and he was after Michael. She lurched out of the chair and whirled towards the exit. To her surprise, she found the ubiquitous Erica standing in the doorway. Again, Celine thought impatiently. I need to fasten a bell to this inquisitive little domestic. I've been looking for you everywhere, the blonde servant vamp explained, sounding a trifle put out. She glanced around the musty archive hall with disdain, as though no vampiress in her right mind would frequent such a tedious locale. So what else is new? Celine thought in response to Erica's complaint. Not now, she said briskly. If Lucian were back and plotting against her coven, then appeasing Erica was the least of Celine's concerns. She moved towards the exit, expecting Erica to step aside. Instead, a slim white arm shot out, blocking the doorway. He's been bitten. You're human, the petite maidservant blurted. He's been larked by a Lycan. Celine blinked in surprise. Was this some sort of twisted joke? Surely Erica could not be serious. Did Craven put you up to this? She asked suspiciously. No, Erica shook her head. I saw the wound with my own eyes, I swear it. Could she be telling the truth? Celine's mind raced back to the night before, when she had rescued Michael from the Lycan. Lucian. At the apartment building, she remembered dragging Michael out from beneath the Lycan. After the wounded beastman fell atop Michael in the elevator, had the Lycan somehow managed to bite Michael before she had extracted the panicked human from the stranger's grasp? Perhaps she conceded reluctantly in the speed and confusion of that hasty escape. Anything was possible. Was Michael now the enemy? Had he been lost to her? Revocably? No, Celine decided abruptly. I refuse to accept that. Michael was too important to all of them to give up on so readily. The thought of him becoming just another rapacious subhuman monster tore at her heart in ways she could scarcely bring herself to comprehend. One way or another, I'll find some other way to save him. She locked eyes with Erica, then shot a cool glance at the servant girl's outstretched arm, wilting before Celine's steely gaze. Erica lowered her arm and stepped aside, allowing Celine to pass over the threshold into the corridor beyond. But what about the Covenant? Erica asked nervously. The other woman left the library behind. The inexperienced maid hardly needed to remind Celine of the Covenant of Blood. This was the sacred code in which old vampiresses had lived and hunted for her entire undead existence. To fear for the safety of the one whom the wolves had claimed for their own went against everything Celine had always believed and fought for. I don't care, she thought, storming off towards the questionable privacy of her own quarters. Erica's plaintive wail followed her down the lonely corridor. You know, it's forbidden. Dr. Adam Lockwood yawned as he made his rounds at the hospital. It was a busy night on casualty ward, and made all the worse for them being short-handed. For the 100th time this evening, he wondered what had become of Michael Corvin. The other American had already missed 2 shifts and failed to answer any of the supervisor's increasingly urgent phone messages. I hope he's alright, the overworked intern worried. Michael's always been so responsible before. The antiseptic atmosphere of the hospital filled his nostrils as he filed through the ward on his way to the doctor's lounge. A fresh pot of coffee was calling his name, and Adam figured that a prompt infusion of caffeine was just what the doctor ordered. No stimulants were required to jumpstart his heart. However, when the door to his right suddenly flew open and powerful hands grabbed him by the shoulders and physically yanked him into an empty examining room. What the hell? Adam tried to call out, but a sweaty palm clamped down over his mouth. I don't believe this, he thought frantically. I'm being mugged in my own hospital. The door slammed shut, trapping Adam inside the room with his assailant. A hoarse voice whispered in his ear. Don't be afraid, it's me, Michael. Michael? The frightened doctor nodded, acknowledging the message, and the intrusive hand came away from his face. Adam resisted the urge to shout for assistance, electing to find out a little bit more about the situation before pushing the panic button. He owed Michael that much. For friendship's sake. Michael's a good guy, Adam reasoned. He can't possibly be dangerous, can he? Another hand let go of his shoulder, and Adam slowly turned around to face his fellow resident. Moonlight entered the exam room, though a closed glass window, and Adam was shocked by what the eerie silver radiance revealed. Michael looked like hell. He was still clad in the same blood-stained jacket and pants he'd been wearing the night before. After he got caught in the bloodbath in the metro station, mud and grass further stained the bedraggled garments, which looked as if they'd been dragged along with Michael himself through some god-forsaken war zone. Michael's face was pale and slick with perspiration. His eyes were bloodshot, and an ugly purple bruise besmirched his forehead. He shivered uncontrollably, his hands shaking like branches in a gale. Numerous small cuts and scratches went untreated on his face, neck and hands, while livid black shadows hung beneath his manic brown eyes. He looked sick, feverish, out of control. Adam barely recognized the capable young doctor he had come to know over the last several months. "For the love of God, Michael, what's happened to you?" Michael's explanation, such as it was, did not reassure the other doctor, who listened with mounting alarm as his distraught colleague launched into a bizarre, irrational story of car chases, shootouts, levitating women, attacked dogs, and growling monsters on the roof. It was totally preposterous, yet Michael sounded scarily sincere, describing each nightmarish event with paranoid intensity. He paced erratically as he spoke, tracking back and forth across the room like a caged animal. And ever since he bit me," he insisted, "I've been having these, I don't know what you call them, hallucinations? Delusions?" He stared inwardly at the hellish sights only he could perceive. "All I know is that it feels as if my skull is splitting in half." Adam tried to keep up with the outro narrative. A full-grown man bit you?" Michael tugged down his collar, exposing an appalling-looking bite wound on his right shoulder. Stepping forward to take a closer look, Adam saw the wound consisted of 4 deep puncture marks in Michael's well-developed trapezius. To Adam's dismay, the area around the bite was hot and discolored. The site was very obviously infected. Sure it wasn't a dog? He peered at the marks through the smudged lenses of his glasses. From the bite radius, he guessed the largest hound was responsible. A Great Dane, perhaps, or a German Shepherd. Michael angrily swatted his hand away. "I said it was a man!" Adam backed away wearily, startled by the other man's violent outburst. "Okay," he said in the same palpitating tone they used with grieving relatives and strung-out drug addicts. "But you're the one talking about hallucinations here, not me." Michael sagged visibly, as though his momentary flare-up had exhausted him. Wondering once more if he should call security, Adam cautiously guided Michael over to the exam table. A nearby desk and clothes cabinet completed the room's meager furnishings. "Come on, take a seat." Paper crinkled as Michael grudgingly complied. He sat sideways on the padded table, his legs dangling several centimeters above the floor. He looked calmer now, but Adam was still shaken by Michael's disturbing behavior. A few moments ago, "He's not himself tonight, that's for certain." Summoning up his most soothing bedside manner, Adam timidly approached Michael again, taking a closer look at the swelling purple bruise on the injured resident's forehead. "Nice," Adam observed sarcastically. "From the looks of this, I'm betting you have a mild concussion." He feared, however, that a concussion was the least of Michael's problems. Is he on drugs? Adam wondered. Michael hadn't seemed like the type, but you never knew. It dawned on Adam that he knew very little about Michael's life away from the hospital. Why were those policemen so interested in him yesterday? Removing a digital thermometer from his pocket of his lab coat, the lanky doctor inserted the instrument into Michael's ear. Meanwhile, Michael grabbed some medical supplies off the nearby table and began dabbing the infected bite marks with an alcohol swab. Judging from the lurid discoloration around the puncture wounds, Adam guessed that alcohol wasn't going to be enough. Michael was probably going to need antibiotics. Concussion or not, Michael rasped. This guy definitely after me, just like those cops. Adam swallowed guiltily. He had just been thinking about the same thing about the police officers. That is, was Michael in trouble with the law somehow? Did he have something to do with the gunfight in the underground? Hard to believe, he thought. Then again, he had never seen Michael look or act this way before. The thermometer beeped electronically, and Adam drew the device from his patient's ear. His vague misgivings about Michael's recent activities were displaced momentarily by his shock at the young man's temperature, which was an alarming 40 degrees Celsius. Jesus Christ, he blurted. You're burning up. But Michael was too caught up in his crazed delusional narrative to react to Adam's pronouncement. He rambled morosely as he applied a dab of ointment to his shoulder and began bandaging the wound there. And the woman from the subway. Celine, I'm not sure, maybe? His red eyes took on a manic gleam as the hysterical edge crept into his voice. Hell, for all I know, they were all in on it too. Together. He was definitely freaked out. Adam concluded more than a little spooked by the way the other man was acting. For heaven's sakes, Michael, he exclaimed, hoping to yank the delirious resident back to reality. In on what? Haven't you been listening? Michael snapped. Adam backed away from the exam table. She took me hostage. Sure she did, Adam thought skeptically. Chances were Michael's gun-toting mystery woman was just one of the hallucinations he'd mentioned. This is more than I can deal with on my own, Adam decided, glancing at the door. He's too far gone. All right, he said, humouring Michael. Calm down. I'm going to help you get this all sorted out. He edged slowly towards the exit, but his attempted departure provoked Michael, who lunged off the table and grabbed the doctor tightly by the arm. Adam's heart pounded wildly, as he suddenly feared for his life. Whoa, I'm just going to run to my office and grab a number. Please, he thought, scared to death of his fellow resident. Don't hurt me. I beg you. A good friend of mine is a lawyer. He'll know what to do. Would Michael buy this? Adam held his breath, waiting anxiously for the agitated man's reactions. An endless moment passed, during which time Adam's life and semi-promising career passed before his eyes. Before Michael finally let go of his arm, he slumped back against the exam table. Sorry, he apologized. I'm just... An overpowering sense of relief left Adams weak at the knees. That was close, he thought, exhaling at last. Michael was clearly out of control. He might be capable of anything. I must be crazy staying alone with him in here. I need to get help. Stat. It's okay, he assured Michael, flashing a reassuring and entirely fraudulent smile. Once again he backed slowly through the door. His fingers groped clumsily behind his back for the doorknob. Relax. I'll be right back, I promise. He fully expected Michael to pounce on him like a madman. The moment he turned the knob, but to his blissful surprise, the crazed resident actually permitted him to slip out the door, into the hallway. Adam gently pulled the door shut again, wishing he had the key to lock it, before allowing all his pent-up fear and anxiety to leave him shaking and pale outside the exam room. I made it, he thought, gasping in relief. Thank God. A layer of cold sweat glued to his white cotton shirt to his spine. Closing his eyes, he took a moment to recover from the psychological strain of his nerve-wracking encounter with Michael, before fishing around in his pockets for the card those two policemen had left with him yesterday. Where the heck had he put it anyway? Ah, there it is. Drawing his cell phone, he hastily dialed the number on the card. The two officers, Pierce and Taylor, arrived with surprising speed, less than 10 minutes after receiving Adam's call. Whatever they want, Michael thought, the doctor deduced. It must be serious. He felt certain that he had made the right decision in contacting the police. Thank you for coming, he murmured to the uniformed officers. He kept his voice low just in case Michael was listening. Throughout the ward, puzzled nurses and patients watched curiously as he guided the cops towards the examination room, now occupied by the agitated man. I don't know what's the matter with him, Adam babbled fretfully. I've never seen him like this before. The burly officers nodded briskly, striding towards the closed door with their hands on their grips of their pistols. Adam hoped they wouldn't be too rough on Michael. Whatever trouble he was in, I probably should notify the American embassy, he thought, unless the police usually handle that. He wasn't exactly sure about the procedure. They were almost at the exam room when a loud crash came from the other side of the door. Glass shattered noisily, electrifying Pearson Taylor, who sprang immediately into action. Guns drawn, they charged the door, slamming it open with their shoulders. Adam followed them, prudently, keeping a safe distance behind the cops. He flinched in anticipation of violence and gunplay, but the only sound that came from the besieged exam room was the mournful keening of the window. I don't understand, he thought. He had been watching the door the whole time. He'd been waiting for the police to arrive. Michael couldn't have got away. And what was that crashing sound? He peeked sheepishly through the doorway into the examination room. Wind and rain entered through a broken window at the far end of the room. The taller of the two policemen, Pierce, ran to the window and peered through the empty pane at the street below. Scowling, he turned towards his partner and shook his head. Adam guessed that Michael was nowhere to be seen. The frustrated cops glared at Adam. He was right here, the doctor insisted. He threw his hands in the air, pantomiming helplessly. It's not my fault, he thought defensively. If your prime suspect jumps out the window, I'm lucky he didn't attack me, given his deranged state of mind. Pierce and Taylor exchanged an ill-tempered looks, then thundered out of the empty exam room, ignoring Adam completely as they shoved past the doctor on their way out. The cold wind blew against Adam from the broken window, and he pulled the door shut to cut off the draft. He watched the policeman depart, disturbed by the unconcealed fury he had glimpsed in the men's dark eyes. "Hey!" he called after them. He hurried to catch up with the cops before they left the building. "You're not going to shoot him, are you?" Michael waited until he heard Adam's footsteps recede into the distance, then warily opened the door of the cabinet, taking care not to rattle the metal clove hangers dangling around his head and shoulders. He peered through a crack-sized opening at the moonlit exam room. A flash of lightning outside exposed every shadowy corner of the room. The coast looks clear, he decided, grateful that both Adam and the policeman had fallen for his trick with the window. He slipped stealthily out the cabinet onto the tile floor of the examination room. He looked around apprehensively, wondering how long it had been before someone decided to check this room again. I have to get out of here. But where? Going to the police was out. According to Adam's message yesterday, the local cops were already suspected that he had something to do with that bloody gunfight. According to Adam's message yesterday, the local cops already suspected they had something to do with the bloody gunfight in the subway, and Michael wasn't sure he couldn't convince them otherwise, given everything that had happened to him since. He appeared to be right in the middle of this murderous mess. Whatever it was all about, the American embassy over at Liberty Square was no good either. If even Adam thought he was crazy, what would the sensible folks at the US Embassy think when he tried to explain what had happened to him? Hell, Michael thought, even if I'm starting to question my own sanity. Nausea struck him, and he bent over convulsingly, clutching at his gut. He clenched his jaw tightly shut to keep from vomiting and fought like a madman to ride out of the seizure. Sweat beaded on his forehead while the insides felt as if they were turning inside out. Jesus Christ! What's wrong with me? Michael wondered in anguish. None of his hard-won medical training pointed him towards a reasonable diagnosis for his condition. His vision flickered in the moonlight, briefly going colorblind before reverting to normal again. His infected shoulder throbbed in sync with dreadful pounding inside his skull. His teeth ached within his gums, as if they were being twisted out of shape. But he was more than just physically ill. He was going crazy too. Phantom warriors, wielding silver crossbows and bolts, lurked at the fringes of his vision. Fragmentary impressions and images that had no relation to life, he remembered, were shuffled among his memories like an extra ace in some devious card trick. He closed his eyes for an instant, and he was back in the primeval forest again, being chased through the moonlit woods by a shadowy figure in chainmail and armor. That's not me, he thought violently. That never happened. But he could still feel the spongy forest floor beneath his bare feet, smell the sap flowing from the trees as he ran for his life. Through that murky sylvan dreamscape, the cursed brand on his arm burned like a red-hot flame. He tasted his own blood upon his tongue. I'm sick, Michael realized in despair. I need help. But whom could he turn to? In desperation, a face flashed across his memory. Inscrutable chestnut eyes beneath a mane of long sable hair, skin as white as untouched snow. An exotic apparition, wild, mysterious, and enticing. For better or for worse, there was only one person who might be able to see him through this nightmare. Celine.